Um, it's a pleasure and honor to welcome to Living Histories Professor John Doyle to tell us about living histories. John, please tell us about living various histories.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure what this was kind of all about, and I didn't do my homework. So I sort of threw this together this morning, and then I've been modifying it while I was sitting here to try to make it more interesting. So here's the boring part: is I have and I think I'm an outlier here. I have an under BS and MS and EE from MIT and a PhD in math from Berkeley. I don't think doesn't seem like there's any engineers or mathematicians in this crowd, but you do a lot of engineering and use math, so I think that's okay. Let me just say a little about my employment. I had a really exciting job when I was 19. The United Banks of Colorado was doing the first fully automated electronic funds transfer system. And they hired me as a hacker. And so what they would put me in these various scenarios where I had limited access to their technologies, yet I was supposed to try to steal money from them. And that was really fun. And so And then, but the most important thing I think was in 1976, while still an undergrad, I became sort of the resident theoretician for Honeywell and who had the best controls group in the aerospace industry. And this really was incredibly important for me because my academic career has been kind of a lot of warfare and always having this, at least in the beginning, having this consulting job. I didn't need an academic job. But eventually I did take one at Caltech in 1985. Um, and I think the big date was starting the Control Dynamical Systems department in 1994. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But then I think the only thing that my colleagues at Caltech think that I ever did was any good was I was on the search committee that hired Richard Murray, if you know him. But I realized this is boring. So what's a little more interesting might be what I did in high school. So I was quarterback of the football team in 1971, and we had a very serious athletic school. So I was a very probably more serious about athletics than academics. And I led our football team to the worst record in school history. Um, I think this is a metaphor for my life. But I broke all the offensive records of the school, and the only game we won was against the eventual state champion, which is insane, right? And so I think I took some classes, but I don't really remember. Um, so let me talk a little bit about this. So this is my first paper, first journal paper, and it's the shortest abstract in IEEE history. Um, and it was based on my bachelor's thesis, right, in 1976. And this sort of started a war because um, this LQG regulator is what was being taught to me at MIT. And it was being taught to me that they had these guaranteed margins. And that was wrong. And so I produced this counterexample that said that was completely false. And that sort of put a torpedo through modern control theory in the 70s and sort of began the start of robust control. And uh, so, but I was very lucky because at this point, there was really nowhere I could do a PhD in engineering in the United States. But I didn't need to. I had this consulting business. I didn't think I was going to go to grad school. And then I found that the winters in Minneapolis were so cold I couldn't possibly live there. So I needed to find warm place to spend the winters, and I went to Berkeley, did a PhD in math. So then I had this, but also I tried the shortest master's thesis in MIT history. It was just 20 pages. It was on information theory and it was forward building. No, it actually, I mean, if you looked at my thesis, you'd go, how in the world did they give you a master's degree for this trivial thesis? Well, it turns out the only reason was because I solved correctly a problem that they had just given a PhD to for solving it wrong. And they'd already published it in the IEEE transactions on information theory. So it turned out to be not that interesting and kind of trivial, but they'd gotten so wrong that when I fixed it, they decided that they would give me a master's thesis, provided I promised never to publish it. So didn't ever publish that. So but beyond math, I've had a lot of research interests, which I'm sort of listing here. So aerospace is where I really started. but lots of other things. And I got into science a little bit with physics. That didn't go well. I found that one of the reasons I got away with what I did in engineering was on the one side, the math people really, really believed in rigor. And in those days, the engineers really didn't want to crash airplanes. And so the math is still about rigor. I'm not sure engineering cares so much about not crashing airplanes as they used to, which is unfortunate. But I came into science and particularly physics, and there was just none of the rigor that I expected. And so it was very, very difficult for me because a counterexample is no longer a counterexample. It's just one of many examples. Who cares, right? And so that was a struggle. I would say the physics direction was largely a failure. But I also got interested in wildfires and earthquakes. And so that's been really interesting to live in LA and study these things. But then biology, medicine, networks, and then the thing I'm really working on now is neuroscience and cancer immunology, and I sort of have a hobby of social architecture. And the key to all this is to, and I found was have the best domain experts as collaborators. And in every one of these, I've been really lucky to get like the world best person. And the whole field thinks you're crazy, but if the best person thinks you're on the right track, then eventually you win, right? You're eventually it's good. And the other one is have students that are much smarter than you. And I've been really good at that. So this is, obnoxious bragging, but I figured this would be interesting. So 13 of my advisees, I put that in quotes, are or were professors in the top 9 world universities. So high density in those top schools. And Yale's number 10, and I don't have anybody at Yale. Um, and then this Roberti Prize started for control theory in like 2004, and it's sort of it's like for control theory. So it's a mini Fields Medal, but it's very much narrower. So Fields Medal is all of math. This is just control theory. But 11 of the 20 are Caltech CDS alums of just 2 professors at Caltech. 6 of the last 7 are CDS alums, and 3 of those 6 are the only females so far to win the award. And our competing universities are at least 10 times our size. So all the usual universities you'd expect to see here are at least 10 times our size. Yet we completely dominate the field in this sense. And so the only question is, were these my advisees? Well, not really. I mean, I'd recruit them to come to Caltech. I teach them some of the math tools and then point them to a frontier. So he was to build teams. So I rarely co-author with students on the theory parts. And the older students advise younger students, and then that just recurses. And basically, I'm just fundamentally lazy. So I don't want to really actually have to do all that work of being an advisor and read their papers and all that kind of stuff. So it works out great. So by the time they graduate, their CV looks like a tenure package. Um, so a little more on the athletics. So so the high school, I was basically a loser and I was injured all the time. Then I went to college and was also a loser and injured all the time. So my athletic career was quite disappointing and probably good because if I tried to be a professional, I would have never succeeded. Um, and so, but after 40, I quit doing team sports and I had less injuries and I actually won a world championship in cycling. And I had world records in rowing, but that was age group. So this was world champion cycling was not age group, but this was over 40. And I had lots of national regional stuff. So I finally got doing the right athletics that I was actually good at, and fortunately old enough that I wasn't tempted to try to go back and be a professional. So that's sort of my basic story. A little different, hopefully, but I think I got us a little bit back on time.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, you did. And audience, please keep sending me your questions via chat. Um, wow. I'm thinking about where to begin in terms of questions. Would you please elaborate a little bit more on this very interesting point that you brought up of not thinking about the people whose, let's say, dissertations you are supervising as advisees per se, but rather as, some form of but rather as I will let you explain.
Well, here's the thing is, my students, I never needed an advisor. I never co-authored a paper with anybody in academia until I wrote papers with my students. So I was very independent. And I want students that are like that. And so my students are very independent. They don't really need an advisor. What they need is an environment. What they need is someone to tell them what's over the next hill. Not the answers, what's there, but where the right questions are. And and I mean, I think the reason we so utterly dominate a field with just two professors instead of 50 is that the other person is Richard Murray. I think we both took this attitude that we were going to treat our students as colleagues. We didn't worry about what they were going to do for our group, what kind of student fits in. So here the point was, what's best for the students? And I had the luxury of doing that because these are the smartest kids on the planet. And they completely dominate our field and have gone into all sorts of other fields and had a big impact. And so the other thing, control theory is like the worst sexist field you can imagine. No women. It's on the boundary between math and engineering, and it had a bunch of bullies and stuff like that. So I wanted to change that too. And so towards the end of my career, and I moved to La Jolla, and I'm retiring next month, mostly for health reasons. Um, but towards the end of my career, I've had just basically all women students. So you notice that in these big awards, the only three students that have won these out of 20 have been recent, and they've been our students, females. And I could say I'm sort of some DI warrior and stuff, but honestly, uh, at a place like Caltech, you get these perfect CVs, you get these perfect applications. They're number one at MIT and never missed a problem set in their life, right? And so, um, but then if you look closer, what do you want out of those people? The guys who look and sound like me and never done anything else in their life would be a nerd? Or do you want people who don't look like me and had some struggles? Either they're athletes and they had struggles like I did, so I learned to fail and get up again, or they're women, or they're just not loud white boys. And the degree to which being a loud white boy helped me all this way is disgusting. And so, but it's just a fact that if you have diversity, you're going to outperform the people who don't. And I could say I've been doing it for some social justice reason, but I'm really selfish. I want to win. And so you win with diversity. And the most important source of diversity, obviously, is women. And so my group has just been almost completely women in the last decade or so. And again, they just utterly dominate the field now. And so I don't know, that's probably too long an answer.
You brought up a point that we have had a couple of follow-up questions touching on, which I want to dwell on a little bit. So let me ask both questions. Do you think the athletic teams helped you develop research teams? And
Oh,
similar,
yeah.
sorry, John, one more. Similar
Yeah.
question. Do you find analogy lessons between athletics and academic professional career?
Well, I never had an athletic career, right? So mine it was all amateur. But um, but I do think there's for first of all, I think it was good to lose and get up again and go the next week, right? The problem is I mean, certainly it was the case for me. Um, you know, most kids who come to Caltech have never been in a room with anybody smarter than them, and they've never missed a problem set in their life, right? And then research is not like that. Research is you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong. And, oh, you're right. Okay. So it's like, at least I'm extreme. I'm like the batter that strikes out every time and every once in a while hits a home run. Like I said, lose, 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 and then beat the state champions. Right. And so I want students that were, women, were athletes, were musicians, because they've had to struggle. And guys that look like me have an easy time. It's so disgusting how easy it. I mean, even all these challenges, I knew I was going to win. I was always going to win. And so anyway, I think two aspects of it was learning to lose and pick yourself up again. And you don't want to get good at losing, but you want to be able to win after you've lost. But also, I think team is what you learn is in in football and basketball in particular, which I played, was you want diversity, even if they're all even if they're all loud white boys. You want big guys, you want little guys, you want fast guys, you want strong guys, and so you learn that diversity is enormously functional. So where do you get that in academia? And I think we've got a recipe for it at Caltech, and and I do like the fact that it does some social justice value. Okay. But the main reason is just want to be the best, right? And right now in my field, women are the best. And I think that's true in a lot of fields. Maybe that'll change. But right now it's kind of an accident that women have access to education, but um, they're still mistreated, I think, along the way. And a lot of them have imposter syndrome, and you got to get them over that. And I have whatever the opposite of imposter syndrome is. So I'm not very sensitive to it, but I think I help people get over it. And so I do think the athletics really, really helped me a lot in multiple ways. And I've had, world elite athletes in my group, right? And so I've had really excellent athletes and musicians. And I really like people that do that, or just people who've had other experiences. So they weren't just head down being a geek their whole lives, right? That's mostly it.
Thanks again, John, for generously sharing your living histories with us. On behalf of the audience, I'm thanking you. In the interest of time, I'm closing